Hi, I'm Lisa Singer. I am the Senior Director Event Programming at MediaPost, and this is Brand Insider BTS, where I get to pull back the curtain on some of the most influential women marketers today. And with me, I'm speaking with Samantha Deevy. She is the Chief Strategy Officer at BBH USA. Hey, Samantha.
You're so good at that.
I've done it a few times, so did you like my radio voice?
It's so good. I was immediately soothed. I was like, oh, I need to find my radio voice because I don't have it, as you can probably tell. Nothing soothing.
No. Well, it's I've been told that actually. I had a news director and I'm like, well, does that mean I'm putting people to sleep? Like it's very
No, I want you to read me audiobooks before I go to bed each
yeah.
night.
I
Yeah.
think get to that. That would be a good side gig. All right, I'll check to that. All right, so I have to say, I always, I start off saying I do my snooping, and of course I did my snooping with you. And one, we're going to get into, you seem a little crazy on your LinkedIn, and like you seem like you're up for things, put it that way. So we'll have a little
Good.
fun as we move forward. But I first am sort of going back to, I look at the companies and BBH, and your motto is, or one of them, when the world zigs, zag. And I know that actually came from the first ad when you guys first launched in 1982 in London. And the first ad was a Levi's ad. And it was like a bunch of deer in a field, and everyone's looking one way and one's looking the other. And I want to make sure I get the line right. Well, what I just said, when the world zigs, zag. And so I'm assuming that's basically don't be follow like a sheep follower, go outside, color outside the lines. And that's really where you find, creativity or whatever it may be in when we're talking about your agency. But of course, with BTS, we don't talk about the agency, we talk about you. And so I want to know, when have you, instead of zigging, you've zagged? So I want to make sure I was about to say when have you zagged?
It's
When
tricky.
when have you zagged? Let's do professionally first, and then
Yeah.
I'll ask personally.
Okay. Well, so the ad, I will just talk about it briefly because it is, I feel like, so iconic and part of why you join like a BBH. So it's a bunch of white sheep moving this way and one black sheep moving this way, which on its face is already pretty badass, right? But it was for Levi's black jeans and they didn't show any jeans. And that, even think about it today, right?
Mm.
It's so hard to not have your product front and center, to not have your logo in the first three, to not have your distinctive assets all over it. So that ethos of just like, oh, there's such a brilliance to it. I still get chills, which just means I'm an ad nerd. But I think, I think my career has been like a heck of a lot of zags. I don't know a lot of CSOs at creative agencies that started in media. So I was a digital media planner when I started. I remember I graduated in '08, and if you remember '08, no one was hiring. And I came out and I did like 30 informational interviews. Anyone who would talk to me, I would talk to. And this person said, you should meet this person, you should meet this person. And I met someone at Digitas. And I remember I left and I called my dad and I was like, Dad, I think I was just offered my dream job. He was like, what is it? I'm like, I don't know. I actually can't explain it. They don't make the ads, they place them. And he was like pop-up ads. And I was like, no, like not that, but maybe that. I had no idea. But what was so interesting to me was just getting to trade in ideas. That's really what I wanted. And this was my foot into that. So from, media planning to kind of even my experience in media was pretty unique. I always sat at a media agency that had a creative partner within the holding company. So Digitas, I worked on craft. We did a lot of the creative. So I always thought media and creative came together. And then I went to PhD. I worked on SE Johnson and the creative was in BBDO. I sat at BBDO half the time. And again, I just thought that was normal. They moved me to New York where I led the SAP business. And again, creative was at BBDO. So that's how I thought the industry worked. So I went from a media planner to a comm strategist, but I didn't even know it. And then Droga came knocking. I knew someone who went there and they asked if I would work there. And my first response was, they hire people like me? I was like, fabulous. And I
Uh-huh.
kind of, again, went there sight unseen. I didn't know what a comm strategist was at the creative side, but I knew that I loved being around ideas. And that's what Droga offered me. And I kind of haven't looked back since. So I think the path is pretty unique, but more and more, I think we're seeing that sort of divergent skill set or divergent background in strategic leaders. And I think the industry only gets better for it.
Well, I think it sounds like you're just up for anything, in the sense of having an open mind with your career. I don't mean, I'm not talking about anything personal. That could be the case too, but I'm just mean you're open minded to if something strikes your interest or something just seems like okay, this feels right or whatever it may be. You're open to that as opposed to saying, sort of defining what your next career step is going to be. It
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I once in a review that someone gave me like a performance review, they said she thrives with an ambiguity. And I think that actually is kind of a core trait, which I've gone to a lot of places where my job didn't exist before I had it, or I kind of started and there wasn't a lot of infrastructure. And what I found is I'm very good at solving problems and using creativity to solve problems. And ultimately, that applies to so much of strategy and so much more. And I pull on, a comms planner is what I call like a conduit discipline. You sit in between all the other disciplines and make sure that everything works as effectively as it can. And I'm a middle child. So I'm like, I'm born for this, right? Like, just give me a whole lot of smart people and really incredible ideas and a set of problems that need to be solved. And like, I'm a willing architect to do it. So I think that's definitely kind of a driving force. And I mean, have a glass of wine with me and you'll find out I am pretty down for anything. So it definitely pervades in real life too.
Well, it sounds it, and I agree with the middle child thing. I'm a middle child, although I had a second. I'm a twin, so there's two of us.
Mm,
But I was always the one, the born producer. Even with
yeah.
my brothers and sister, would for like my parents' anniversary, would put together plays, and of course, like they'd be out on a Saturday night, so I'd be like, all right. This is what we're doing, and we'd like have these elaborate, like big cars, like out of cardboard, and like, all right, this is what you got to do. And I was the organizer, so I agree with that. I do think that is a quality of a middle child. All right, so now, even though you said you are up for anything, and we can just let our minds wander, but I'm just curious, a specific time that might stand out for you in your personal life that you zagged.
Oh God. One, I think it's kind of funny how I ended up in New York was my other half at the time had a job offer in New York. I had a job offer in Singapore. And how we decided was whoever got the paperwork in first won. And it
Wow.
was like not further than that. We were just sitting there and we were like, two incredible opportunities. Both of us can find their way there. And we were kind of like, let's let the world decide it. And New York paperwork came in, I think it was like a day and a half before the offer for Singapore. And so that's how I ended up in New York 11 or 12 years ago now.
That's awesome. So you just kind of left it to the fates.
Yes, exactly.
All right, I like that. Similar to sort of not with your career, but again, being open to it's going to be okay whether you're in New York or in Singapore. So let's just see where it goes.
Totally. And, I think a huge thing, and I talk about this a lot, is follow the people, right? And that became true. And you don't always have the luxury of that. You always don't know the situation you're walking into. But time over time, to your point, I'm very open. If I'm interviewing with a company, like back then, I was younger then, but if you really like the vibe, if you feel like this person is going to teach me something, if this is going to be someone who I know just being around and being in a room, it's going to make me better, then that's something I'm willing to dive into. And I'm pretty confident I can figure it out. And that's a spirit that is like carried through from when I was 22 to today. I want to surround myself with the best and smartest people, not because of the work or even the output, which I think I hold myself and those around me to a very high degree, but because there's a reason we chose advertising. There's a reason I don't work in finance. I would have made a really kick-ass lawyer, I promise. But there's a reason I didn't, and it's because I wanted to be surrounded by creativity and ideas. And so when you find those people where you're like, and it's one of my favorite parts about BBH of just whether it's a brief and someone cracks an insight and you're like, I hadn't even thought of that. Whether it's someone, the idea that you see on a page and you can already see all the ways it's going to come to life, like that's magic. And that starts and kind of ends with the people you surround yourself with. So that's kind of the wind I like to follow.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I won't go into it, but around 22, I had an offer where it would have been if this is the dream
Yeah.
job, but I went another direction, totally different, but for the similar reason. I just had a vibe. I was more inspired. I felt like it was good for me at that time, so I think I think in talking with many of you, many women in your position, or in similar positions, that you do follow that a bit. I mean, there are others who have more of a plan, and then others who, do it their own ways. But I think being open to what ignites you, what sort of gets you revved up, because that's what's going to make you better at your job. I mean, I think if you're
Yeah.
bored, then your work's going to come across that way.
Totally. And it's gotten hard. Advertising's hard, right? And it's only gotten harder over, I think, I've been in it for 17 years now. Um, you know, the duration of client relationships have gotten shorter. The tenure of CMOs has gotten shorter. The preponderance of data has made it harder to like make bets and creativity because everyone wants these instant indicators that it worked. And that can get hard, right? The pressures that are put onto clients are put onto us and, put back. And I think that it's kind of that openness and that retaining the curiosity that can keep you still excited by it. Because if you lose your excitement for it, then it just feels that you just feel the hard, you feel the slog, you feel the hours, you feel what it's like. But when you sit there and go, it's a damn good idea, you kind of forget, right? When you
Yeah.
like the people you're sitting around and you see that, and it doesn't just have to be the creative output. I can get very excited by a framework. Like, don't tempt me with a good time. My brain is 80% frameworks. And you see it and you're just like, even the ability to take this abstract information and make it seem singular and make it seem so interesting, like that will jazz, like that gets me jazzed. So it really is to me about how do you make sure that you just continue to find the excitement, because we chose this and it's hard, but there's a reason we chose it. And every day, like there's a reason to continue choosing it. And I really try to focus on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's smart. And going back to what you said in the sense that it's harder today, advertising, and it's not, there's so many different, avenues. I mean, one, with digitization and just, AI, and like, so it's no longer just, hey, I'm creative, or I can come up with a slogan. Like there's really so much more to do. And as you said, it's a little bit more difficult in terms of making those kind of connections sometimes. So someone starting out when you would, but let's say today, not when you
Mhm.
were starting out, what what advice do you give that person wanting to be you, wanting to get to a senior position like yourself, and they can't necessarily pick and choose their people? I mean, I know, again, it's a different feeling. It's different than when you first started the
Yeah.
world, the advertising world. So what's that main advice just to get that person started to sort of think in line and think in terms of, to really sort of have, at least a better chance at success?
I have sort of two pieces of advice I would give any of them, particularly in strategy. The first is kind of just a worldview, which is stay curious, be willing to go down the inconvenient rabbit hole. I say if from a strategic perspective, when a brief comes in, if you just go to the expected sources, you're just going to get to the expected answer. And we all have in the end, as much as we all try to brand our agency, what we have similar tools. We all have the similar internet. We all have the same TikTok, but it's the angle in which you take to solve the problem that's ultimately going to make what your output is feel special, feel unique, feel really bespoke to kind of the product you create. But you're never going to get there in a straight line, right? So it's actually like this, and maybe this is unpopular. 2 hours on TikTok can be incredibly valuable if you're doing it in the right way, not doom scrolling. Okay. We're not in bed. We're not trying to like avoid the world, but with real purpose. Like we all know where culture starts now. Like stay curious and then get out into the world. Like it's important, here, for example, every month we do an offsite with the department because it's like strategy is about understanding humans and what motivates them and connects them. And you're not going to just do that sitting behind your screen. So one is just like be curious and stay curious. Never let that dampen. The second is like much more functional, but it just always worked for me. And you will rarely not be succeeding if you are making your boss's life easier.
Mm.
So as I said, I've worked in a lot of sort of amorphous jobs or jobs that were ill-defined or someone hadn't had the position before me. So no one was laying out what success looked like or what good looked like. So I identified what were the problems that needed to be solved and how can I solve them? What do I see the person above me ultimately doing or grappling with? And what can I do to like, whether that's, updating processes, whether that's taking on projects, you kind of model to them. If you're making their life easier, rarely are you not succeeding. So I would say, I don't think that's talked about this much. It almost sounds very old fashioned, but I think there's a real reality to it that if you're making if you're making the person above you's job easier, you're pretty dang valuable.
Yeah. No, and I think that it's also keep in mind, and just, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it may not be the job that you're wanting, in the sense that you're going into it, I want to be creative or I want to be doing
Yes.
this, but instead you're, not getting coffee, but maybe, or whatever, or, like doing something that's maybe not like working on a spreadsheet or making something fat, like easier for them. And it may be kind of the mundane things, but then it will get you to that point of where you want to be.
Totally. And I think it goes even deeper than that of like, ultimately, what are the barriers that get in away from success? What are people really like? What are people really looking for? Like when I started in comm strategy at Droga, it was still a fairly nascent discipline. So there was a lot of room to define what comm strategy at Droga was. So it wasn't like someone says like, don't touch this. This is a brand strategist job. This is a data strategist job. It was like, no, there's a problem to be solved. And we have all these different sort of, we have these different toolkits we can tap into to do it. You get to define ultimately what the role is or what the discipline even is by identifying what are the things that need to be solved or what are the opportunities that aren't being capitalized on. And so I think it's both in a really functional way, but also then just like looking of what is the like whatever space you're operating within, what are we ultimately trying to achieve and what are the areas that you can like kick butt in, right? Because I think a lot of times too, there's this pressure or this expectation to be good at every facet of every job, and no one is. But finding where your strengths really over-index and then using that to add, the utmost value that you can add, while also being honest with yourself and others of perhaps what your strongest suits aren't. I think there's real value to that.
Yeah. So, and I think in the sense of, I sort of said the drudgery work, but always keep in mind that path, as you said. So
Yeah.
where you offer the most value and where you're most interested. So keeping an eye on that. I'm not saying just because then you don't want to get just bombarded and just being like, okay, I'm just going to do the work, uh, grudge work, whatever.
Honestly, even if it's not the right word, I got it. I was like, grudge work doesn't sound fun. Grunt work doesn't sound fun. I don't want any of that.
That was the word I was going for. Thank you. I know it didn't sound right. Okay, moving on. What is it that people get wrong about you when they first meet you, and maybe they make an assumption? What do you think it is?
I think probably I'm a bit of a character. I'm pretty gregarious, and I think people probably assume that it's a very natural trait of mine and that like I'm a real people person. And it's a bit more of a learned trait. And I know so many people say this, and everyone talks about an introverted extrovert, and I don't actually identify in that way. But I was a really shy kid, and not even shy. And because of people, I just really liked reading and drawing in a corner. My parents would have a party and I'd be like reading and drawing, like, do you want to come hang out? And I'd be like, no, like I'm having a great time. It was I loved imagined worlds. I still read more than I like engage with any other media. It's my favorite. And so I think people often, I think, assume the way that you're presenting is exactly how you are. But I'm like, no, this is a learned skill that I have of like how I like to engage in the world, the energy I like to bring to a space. As I've kind of, had to break out of my shell from when I was younger to, my professional life.
Instead of you don't sit in the corner in your office and and draw.
Yeah. It's funny, even my friends, I'm still friends with like so many people from literally when I was 3. When I'm talking about when I'm a kid, I'm like a little kid. My friends from high school are going to see this and be like, girl, you're already out of your shell. But it really is. I think so much in advertising too. It's interesting. Like the personality traits that are kind of rewarded do tend to be the bigger people who think very quickly on their feet and who can get to the answer quickest in a room. And I've actually, like, funnily enough, found, I think because of like that core of me who's still the kid in the corner who wants to draw, I very much see those people who actually aren't the first to speak, who know they need to take a moment, who after the meeting are going to have the best answer, who aren't necessarily the shiniest object in the room, but they're definitely the most thoughtful and often the smartest. I find myself really gravitating to those people as well, because I think it can be uh, an underlooked or undervalued. We all think we have to answer it within 30 seconds. And you're like, it's okay. We get asked a lot of tough questions. It's okay to not have the answer in that moment and to want to come back and be more thoughtful. So I still find myself kind of attracted to those energies within advertising because I think I still see a lot of my younger self in it.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that you don't, to your point, you don't always have to speak just to be heard. I mean, I think there's a fine line. You don't want to always be the quiet one who doesn't say anything and come up with anything. But if you don't really have anything of value or real value to say, then I mean, we all know those people who just say it, and it's not necessarily what we need to hear. So I just feel like there's a fine line where, especially when you're younger, starting out, you want to share, and you want to sort of add to the conversation. At the same point, you want to just take it all in and learn.
Totally. And I think it's a hard skill to learn because you're often placed in these big rooms, right? And you're the most junior and you're like, do I have a right to talk? Am I supposed to talk? Am I supposed to sit back? And, I think one of my better strengths is I would say I'm a strong presenter. I talk too fast. I know you're shocked to hear that, but beyond that, I tend to be a strong presenter.
Yep.
I know it's shocking. And in part that's because I really like to internalize the content. I like to really know everything I am because at some point it doesn't matter what's on the page. You're talking to a room and you're speaking to a room. And I think that's one of the hardest skills to sort of cultivate because you don't have a moment to like practice that. You don't really get taught that. You're just thrown into these rooms that you're probably like not meant to be in or do not feel that you're meant to be in. And then you're like, okay, go. And this isn't a test, but this is your only chance to learn this skill. Um, I don't even know how I got onto that, but it feels like one of those things that I find of when you're younger, you're thrust into these rooms and just trying to find a way, like, what is my role meant to be? What is my voice? And I now being a senior in my career, it's one of my favorites to actually find the moments to be the person who recedes. So like the brilliance of your team can actually shine. And you sit there and you go like, I'm not needed here. And that's kind of the best feeling.
That's awesome. No, I can totally see that. All right. Well, now we have a little time for fun. Or I hope you'll think it's fun. Um, we're doing trivia. It's trivia.
Ooh, oh Lord.
Yes. So, and as I mentioned, BBH started in London. So
Mhm.
I want to find out your London knowledge.
Okay.
Okay. So the first question is, what is the name Big Ben was actually meant to go by?
I don't even have a clever guess.
Okay, I was thinking, this could happen, so I have multiple choice. So
Okay.
we can see if you have a clever guess. All right, A, clock tower, B, Big Bertha, C, the town clock, or D, the bell tower.
The pragmatism of the clock tower really, really appeals to me.
Ding, 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 ding. Yes. Yay. Big Ben is actually the name of the bell, but it's called the
Indeed.
clock tower. Okay.
All right.
Got it. All right. What is the London Underground informally called?
The tube.
You got it. Didn't even let me, I came
I
up with
forgot that
very
you
nice options to give you. So
got it.
the
This.
tube is correct. All right. The London Stock Exchange was originally located in what? A haberdashery, a coffee house, a bookstore, or a McDonald's?
Okay. I'm again just going to what I want it to be, a bookstore.
So close, but actually a coffee shop, a coffee house.
I
See
can
that,
get behind that.
and I even have some history. In
Ooh.
1698, John Castang, I think it's pronounced, began listing stock and commodity prices at Jonathan's Coffee House. So that was where it first started.
I have not only this is my coffee store. I not only have an espresso at home. So in theory, I don't need to go to a coffee shop. I have two separate coffee shops that know my name in my neighborhood. That's my coffee consumption in case you need like a
So
sense
lots
of
of
why I
coffee.
talk so quickly.
Could explain a lot with hearing you talk. All right, this is the final one. Which famous American didn't move to London? Jimi
Hmm.
Hendrix, Anne Hathaway, Madonna, Kate Moss, or Ed Sheeran?
Who was the first one?
Jimi Hendrix.
Did Anne Hathaway ever go to London? I'm gonna go Hendrix.
Oh, you were so close. Anne Hathaway.
It was Anne Hathaway. You know what? She strikes me as someone who, when there was all the Hatha hate, would have faked a British accent if she could have. So I thought she probably didn't. We're over the Hathaway. We're pro Anne Hathaway now, but should have
Yeah.
gone with my initial gut.
It wasn't the Anne Hathaway thing, but she seems like someone with her characters that she could have easily moved to London. So that's why
Yeah.
I kind of came up with her. But I'm curious, has there been a challenge in your life? Maybe something that was just really kind of gutted you and but you overcame it. You were, maybe at first you were like, how am I going to get through this? But you did. And talk about that a little bit and how you were able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, incredibly formative to me is I lost both my parents when I was, I think, younger than most. So I lost my mom while I was at college, and then my dad about 7 years ago. And I think particularly they were both at like formative life stages as well. Sort of my mom as I was graduating college, and then my dad, I don't think this would be the first thing I would jump to when I think about the moment, but I was becoming, senior in my career and as a leader. And it happened at a trip that sort of is a whole other podcast. But I think it just reframed my relationship to work, and not overtly. I don't know that if you talk to most of my friends, they'd probably say I work a lot and I talk about work and I like work. But it really changed my sort of value system of what I really care about in a day to day. That's why when I talk about the people, I really mean it. I really want to be around the people that I want to be around, and I want to be inspired by them, and I want to be interested by them. For so long in this industry, we talk about like literally the phrase, the work, the work, the work. You see it in the creds decks. And that feels like it's about the outcome, but we spend our days in the process, and the process is the people. And I think it just brings to mind of like your days become your years, and the years aren't as long. So I think it's really made me care about the people. It's really made me want to be an empathetic leader. I think we use the word a lot in the industry. I don't think we see a lot of it in the industry. And I think it's harder than ever to enact it to our clients, to ourselves, to our teams. And I think it's something that it's put an increased value on for me. And it just makes sure that like on a day-to-day basis, as I mentioned before, you find the excitement in it. I want to like it. I really care about liking what I do. And it's tough when it's hard. Like it hits me more profoundly because I want to like it. And so it always creates like this measure or this bar that I'm trying to clear for myself of like, we're going to go there and we're going to do it for that many hours a day. Let's like it.
Yeah. Well, how do you and want, I mean, first of all, I'm sorry that you've lost your parents so young, and but it is a hard thing. I still have mine, so I'm very fortunate. But when you make that decision, it's a purposeful decision. I mean, people can be taken back, like everything is again how people react, how people fail, and what they do after it. Whatever, all of those next steps are really what defines you. And so you now are this person who, as you said, you want to just find that joy. You want to and bring that to your people that you work with. How do you lead in that way? Because one, there's a fine line between, hey, she's the party girl and we're going to have fun. And then we're getting work done and we have to do it. So what do you think you do in terms of to really not only bring your group together, but in a way that's positive?
Yeah. I think first and foremost is I'm in the work with them. So one of the things that I've always like had top of mind is it was always frustrating when you're more junior in your career, when the most senior people like know enough to be dangerous, but then they tend to be dangerous. And so I think one of the first things that I actually do is like the minute I like am working on a client, I act like I'm a junior strategist again. Like I really want to understand it so I can be the partner to my team. So they know it. I'm another pair of hands. I'm a voice, but I'm not just an opinion. I'm part of the team. And I think knowing that people are in it with you is incredibly important. And I think there's a difference between trying to do it with joy and fun. Like a lot of what we do is not fun. It's hard work. And I care a lot about the output. And anyone who's worked with me will tell you I have an incredibly high bar. But I think that how you get there matters. And that's where I think it's knowing that you're in there with them. I think also letting people have their own opinion and voice those opinions. Sometimes do I trump them? Yes, we still get that trump card. But really trying to like make sure that people feel heard within the process. The other thing that I think is important and we don't always get enough of, I'm very transparent as a leader. There's some leaders and it can be a very effective who their superpower is like being the calm through the storm, and they are going to sort of like be there and be like, it's all going to be okay. So you can tell from my gesticulating, that's not going to be me. I'm in it and it's going to be high energy and you're probably going to know what I genuinely think about it. And I think that that's my way of like, I act very human in my leadership style. And that's true of like what's happening. I think it's important that people understand like the state of the agency, why decisions are being made. And there's always a line. There's things that you know and that you can't pass along. But I think sometimes we try to create a shield. But I think that there's real power in information and understanding, even as those people are going to become the next senior leaders, how are decisions made? Why are decisions made? I think is really important. So to me, it's about honesty and transparency and trying to make the process feel one that is supported. So you can find like the fun in it, so your ideas are valued and you feel valued. I think to me, that's what I mean by joy more than the process itself being fun. But the fun parts, it's when we get to have some fun, I like that too.
Well, I'm curious, and yes, I agree, but are you able to let go in terms of, there's, as you said earlier, you can't do everything. People can't do everything. And so, and sometimes it's hard, especially as the leader
Yeah.
and the one that's sort of going to be passing the buck to, in terms of you're the where they go to if it doesn't work. But are you able to trust your staff and know that they're going to do, and I know you trust them. I don't want to put that in your mouth, but I'm just saying like, okay, he's better at that. She's better at this, and sort of let go and let them go with what they do well.
I think you have to. One, you can't do it all, right? We think we've all learned that, and especially as teams scale, doesn't matter how brilliant you think you are, you're not going to be able to be the planner on every single account. But also, I think it's just so disempowering if people don't feel like they ultimately get to take the reins. And I think it's so important, and where I feel so lucky at BBH is I'm surrounded by so much talent and brilliance, and you see that, and it would it would be to the detriment of everyone, myself, the agency at large, to not be handing over the reins to empower those people to take on. So it's definitely, and I think it's one of those things we all grapple with as you get more senior. We're taught how to be really good strategists. You're not necessarily taught how to get really great strategy out of others or how to mold great strategy. That becomes sort of a skill. You're just suddenly like, you're good at strategy, so you become the lead strategist. And then you're suddenly like, oh shoot, now it's not about my thinking, it's about cultivating and crafting, and encouraging the thinking of others. But as I said, I feel really lucky throughout my career, and it remains true. The amount of talent that I've been surrounded by, you just see the downside if you weren't handing it over.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, well, now back to you a little bit more on the personal side. Is there anything that people would be surprised? Maybe they don't know about you. I don't mean, it's not like when I asked before what they're surprised about you, but something that maybe there's a talent that you have, maybe it could be even inconsequential, that you do that no one really, or not many people know about.
I I was like a mega softball player growing up. So I was like an all-state softball player. So I can throw a ball very hard. And because I'm like obsessed with clothes, I'm not afraid of a heel. I don't always think that people jump to my athletic side when they meet me. So I played after a long duration of not having played. I went into an adult league that was like hyper competitive, like male female league, and there was a lot of like ex D1 players, and some people had played in the MLB, and it's played in McCarran Park, which is not necessarily the most like best kept up park. And there's these softball, and I was playing second base, and a boy just ripped a grounder, and it just took what we call a McCarran hop, which means it's like a nonsense hop. So you're ready for it to go here, and it just went straight into my nose. And I had a pitch the next morning that I had to fly to Florida at 6 a.m. And so I called the CMO at BBH now. We've worked together. This is our third agency together. And I had an ice pack on my nose. I'm on my way to urgent care. And it was like, how badly do you think you need me in Florida tomorrow? And she's like, it's kind of critical. And I was like, okay. And I just sent her a selfie. So I flew to Florida with a like medical grade giant thing on my nose to stop the bleeding in an ice pack. And she's a picture from behind me where all you see is the nose plug, 6 inches tall. And I pitched in aviators the next morning.
Wow. How did it go? Did you get the did you get the
You
client?
know? And we didn't even win. And I was like, man, at
Not
least
even a sympathy vote?
the partnership you would have, the commitment you would have gotten from this.
I
This wasn't at BBH. I want to be clear. It was in a previous life. But I was sitting there and I was just like, sometimes you look in the mirror and you're like, what are we doing here?
That's funny. Oh my gosh. My first instinct was to laugh, I realized, which I should have been should have gone the other way a little. Had a little compassion and then could find
No, it really was. And then I just kept considering, I was like, is this just my way in to get a nose job? Is that what I should be using this moment for? And then I found out they have to re-break your nose if you do that. And I'm like, I just spent 6 weeks doing that. I don't have time for that. No one has time for that.
well, I don't think you needed to do that anyway. So it's a good that you figured that out. All right. Guilty pleasure. What's a guilty pleasure?
The Food Network. I'm obsessed with the Food Network. It's my, like in the olden days when dads would have like baseball or golf on, and it's just like the thing, or like radio of these sports. My version of that is the Food Network. And I love to cook. I love food, but there is nary a Food Network show that I have not watched.
Wow. Very good. So do you take the recipes and actually cook? Like if you cook, you said you love to cook, but I mean, do you like I like to I cut and paste a bunch of I have so many recipes in my computer, from whatever year, and
Yes,
I have to be honest, I don't cook a lot of them, but I do there's like my staple of ones that I go to. Do you
I
cook a lot?
love that. So what I tend to do is, let's say there's something I want to make, or I'll be inspired by something I've seen. I will never follow a recipe, but I will look at like 40 recipes and pick what I like from each of them. So
I
you do?
yes,
That's
completely.
the best.
I don't like that seasoning, but I'll add this one.
Yes, exactly. And I'm like, that's definitely not enough salt. I'm gonna go with this one.
Garlic salt is always a good call.
Yes.
That's awesome. All right, I want to get this one question in. Just we have big goals, but what's your
Yeah.
daily win? What's your daily win?
It's kind of what I talked about before. It's finding the enjoyment in the day to day. It's the thing that you're just like, that's cool. And as I said, I feel lucky, and this is true throughout my career, that I'm surrounded by people that enable that. Rarely is the thing I come up with, the thing that makes me go, that's cool, or like gives me that like spike of enjoyment. But it's the idea on the page, it's the insight, it's the interesting approach to research, it's the data nugget that someone dug up on page 300 of Reddit. It's all the thing that just goes like, damn, I love what we do. And I think it's those micro moments, as I said, that like keeps reminding you why we do this. And I never want to lose sight of it. And there's rarely a day that there isn't like a moment or a thing or a person that they don't do something that makes me be like, that's cool.
Well, on that, I think that's a perfect ending. Thank you so much, Samantha. This was such a pleasure. I really appreciate
Thank you. This was wonderful.
it. Great. And thank you for watching. And as I always say, if there's a woman that you know or would like to hear more about and have me sort of go behind the scenes, just let me know and I will do my best. So thanks for watching. Thanks again, Samantha.